And welcome back, everybody, to the Podcaster Nation. That's right. I said welcome back because I know you were just listening to our stuff and you loved it so much that you came back for more. You're brilliant. That was a fantastic decision because we have a lot more for you. Now, why do we have a lot more for you? Because this is the podcast that's about podcasters, for podcasters, and done by podcasters. Folks, our guest today, you did it, you cracked the code, is a podcaster. You are brilliant, in fact. Hey, this is the place where we all come together to raise each other up, and this is the place where the rising tide raises all ships. So let's get sailing and bring out our guest today, boundaries coach, speaker, host of Fragmented to Whole Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. Please welcome Barb Nangle. Barb, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much, Rory. I'm really excited for this open-ended conversation.
I love that. I love that. Do you not get a lot of those open-ended conversations when you're interviewing?
I get quite a few, but there's also quite a number of people that want, they ask questions ahead of time, and then I never remember what I said. But my life is my life. But I really enjoy just banter. I really do.
Awesome. All
Oh,
right.
don't get me wrong, I love a captive audience too, so you may have to interrupt me.
This episode is for you. So I think we're both on the same page. This is going to be great. All right, Barb, I know we have quite a bit we can, dive into here. Before we get going, just tell everybody a little bit about who is Barb Nangle? What are you about? What's your story?
Yeah. So I like to start my story in 2015 when I was 52 years old. I was working at Yale University at the time, and I hit a codependent bottom. And if people don't know what codependent means, welcome to the club. I didn't either. And that was despite having read 70 gajillion self-help books, starting therapy at 15, doing like the workshops and the retreats and the workbooks and all that stuff. And what happened was that I was volunteering on a service project at my church to serve homeless people. And right around that time, a homeless guy named Dan came to our church as a parishioner, and he and I became very friendly. And I sort of felt like it was like, oh, this person was brought here like from God to kind of teach me about what it's like to be homeless so that when I'm serving homeless people, they're personified. They're not like the homeless, they're people. And that actually, he was actually very helpful. Well, a few months into our friendship, we had a really big snowstorm here in New Haven, Connecticut, and I invited him, Dan, to my home to stay overnight, which I now know is not normal. And he did. And then he stayed another time and another time. And within a few weeks, he was practically living with me. And I eventually felt trapped in my own home. He was a self-proclaimed addict and alcoholic. On reflection now, I think he may have also had some kind of personality disorder because this guy messed with my head in a way that I had never experienced. So one day I'm in therapy and I'm talking about Dan, and in the middle of a sentence, I go, "Oh my God, do you think I need to go to Al-Anon?" And my therapist is like, "Yes." So, in case people don't know what Al-Anon is, it's a 12-step recovery program for the loved ones of alcoholics. So, if you're not familiar with 12-step recovery, you've probably heard of Alcoholics Anonymous, which was the very first 12-step program ever created in the 1930s. And it was the first time in human history that droves of alcoholics became and stayed sober. And the reason that Al-Anon came up, began, which was the second 12-step recovery program, now there are hundreds, is that the things that the loved ones of alcoholics tend to do in an effort to try to get their loved one sober, in recovery, into detox, hospitalized, all that stuff, tend to actually backfire. And what happens is the loved ones start putting all of their energy on the alcoholic, trying to control them. And then, of course, the alcoholic feels controlled and then they get resentful and then they blame the family member for their drinking and it just fuels this cycle. So I had heard of Al-Anon and I went home. I don't know what I put into Google, Rory, but I came up across the word codependent and I was like, what is this word? So a codependent person is someone who, like I was just describing, they tend to put the needs of other people, places, and things above them. So it's like, what does he need? What does she need? What do they need? What does the organization need? And they completely neglect themselves. So I started going to Codependence Anonymous and very quickly felt a sense of relief. I think partly from knowing there's like I have a thing that there's a name to and it describes me, and there's other people that have it, and there's a recovery program. And I remember really like within weeks saying to someone, I think I need to be reparented. But I thought I made that term up. I had never heard of reparented. And then 6 weeks into my recovery in, we call it CODA as a, the nickname. I'm 6 weeks into CODA. I go to Cape Cod, Massachusetts to visit my friends, one of whom had been in Alcoholics Anonymous for over 10 years at that time. And she had raved about how just utterly transformed her life was. And I was like, you're going to love this. I'm going to Codependence Anonymous. And she said, oh, great. Let's see if we can find a CODA meeting while you're here and we'll go. And she couldn't, but she found an ACA meeting, which I knew of as ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. And I
Yeah.
never, like, I heard of it as long as I could remember, but it never occurred to me, like, why do adult children of alcoholics need a meeting? And I didn't think that I qualified. But I was like, I'll go for you because her dad's an alcoholic. So I walk in, and in the opening readings, they say, we reparent ourselves. And I was like, what? And then they read the list of the 14 traits of an adult child, and I was bowled over. Now, Heidi tells me I sobbed the whole meeting. I don't remember that, but I remember I bought the literature, came home to New Haven, Connecticut, started going to ACA. I now know it's actually adult children of alcoholics and dysfunctional families. I hadn't heard the and dysfunctional families part. For that, I qualify. And I started going to ACA, and it was like literally what all that stuff I had been doing, the self-help and the retreats and the workbooks and the blah, 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 blah. Like all of that stuff sort of scratched the surface of the iceberg of my life, Rory, whereas recovery melted the iceberg of my life. Now, ACA is a trauma recovery program where you reparent yourself and you use the 12 steps to recover. I didn't understand the trauma piece. I was like, I knew that a couple of traumatic things happened to me when I was an older teenager, but I didn't understand. But I knew that I had those traits from that list. And so a year into that, I was really working the actual 12 steps in ACA. I was just going to the meeting in CODA, and I decided to let that go. And that turned out to be a higher powered moment for me because one of the women that I was doing the 12 steps with in ACA had started talking about her relationship to food, how she had started going to Overeaters Anonymous, and was kind of gently trying to get me to go with her. And I finally went, I won't go into the details about that, but I was like, oh my God, I'm a compulsive overeater. I didn't even know that was a thing. I'm now down over 100 pounds from my top weight. I've actually been at my goal weight for 7.5 years. And this is after a lifetime of like the up and down, the yo-yo, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. So for me, Roy, the 12 steps are where it's at. So, I mentioned I was working at Yale University when I landed in recovery. And after about 2.5 years of being in recovery, I got laid off from Yale. And through a series of serendipitous events, I found my way into the world of startups, entrepreneurship, and innovation in New Haven and at Yale, and eventually decided to start my own business. And very quickly, because of more serendipitous events, started my own podcast. But before I go into that story, which I think people will probably enjoy, not just because they're podcasters, because there's some really cool stuff about that story, but I want to say that for me, I think of codependence as my core issue, my core wound. Now, I drank abusively until I was in my early 40s. I smoked bales of weed. I put myself in like harm's way, dysfunctional relationships and all that stuff. But I think for me, codependence is the core wound. Well, boundaries are essentially the antidote to codependence. So when I learned how to build healthy boundaries, which was really a byproduct of the 12-step recovery process for me, it's not like someone sat me down, they're like, okay, Barb, we're going to build boundaries. But once I had boundaries, I was like, this is amazing. And I started doing some reading about boundaries, and it helped me to kind of retroactively understand what happened when I grew up, what happened through my process of building them. But all the things I was reading were a bunch of words. And so I started drawing, like trying to visually depict, like, what would that look like in the physical world? Well, those drawings turned into handouts, which turned into a workbook, which is the backbone of my boundaries coaching program. So I have a whole full-blown multimedia curriculum called Unshakable You, the Fragmented to Whole method that I take people through. And so I just wanted to like say something about that before I go into the podcasting. So when I first started my own coaching and consulting business, I wasn't a boundaries coach. I didn't understand anything about the business world, despite I grew up in my dad's pharmacy. Like I grew up in a small business, but I didn't understand anything. And I didn't know like you need to have a niche and all that kind of stuff. And this opportunity for the podcast came up. And actually I'm going to tell the detailed story. So um when I started listening to books on tape when I was probably 20, which is when they were literally on cassette tapes and you had to walk around with a Walkman in your hand. And I would listen to them while I was walking as a way to get me to exercise. So I'd be like, you can't listen to it unless you're walking. And since I started listening to them, I always wanted to narrate audiobooks. It was just something I always wanted to do. And in fact, there was 5 years that I was a volunteer for Reading for the Blind and Dyslexic because it was a way for me to kind of do that. And the only reason I stopped is that they closed the New Haven office. So I'm starting to be in the world of entrepreneurship, and I meet this woman who's narrating audiobooks. I'm like, oh my God, how are you doing that? She's like, read this book, they'll tell you how to do it. So I download Audacity, I get the microphone, I get the headphones, I take this deep closet I have in my basement, which is right over there, and I turn it into a studio and I start recording the audiobooks. And this is when the podcasting thing comes up. So this guy that lives in town wanted me to do sales. I think he wanted to do like a podcasting channel. I don't, to this day, I don't understand his business model, but he wanted me to sell like the ads. And I'm like, I'm not a salesperson. I'm a connector, but not a salesperson. But he says, oh, I'm having this podcast pitch event. And I had done 2 sessions with a coach who was telling me, oh, you need to do YouTube videos. And I was like, why do I need to be seen? So I went to an adult ed thing on how to create a YouTube video, got the little lavalier mic and the little stand. But when he said podcast, I was like, okay, I've been listening to podcasts since I got into recovery, about recovery. So I was like, you know what? Let me try that. So I pitched for it, and he said, if there's no winner, it's just if we like what you're doing, we'll produce it for you for free. Again, don't understand his business model. And so the first 3 episodes, I drive to downtown New Haven, go into his studio, sit with him, record it, and then he has to sit with it again when he produces it. So after my third thing, I'm like, dude, I have like a studio in my basement. Can I just record it and email it to you? And he was like, absolutely. And then not long after, I was like, you know what? I hate narrating audiobooks. It's awful. It's because most of it is not narrating. Most of it is the technical stuff and then searching for the books and pitching and all this kind of stuff. So I'm doing the podcast, and I would say it was at least 3 years into my podcasting journey that I had this realization. And it was because probably 3 times that year, I got the message from different people that said this same thing, but in slightly different ways, which is, if you have a desire in you and that you have had for a long time, the universe planted that desire for a reason. And that desire will become fulfilled in this world somewhere. And this explains why multiple people can invent, or 2 people can invent the same thing at the same time in the world, because the universe is like, this shit is going to happen. And so, like, allow the desire to come to fruition. And I realized, oh my God, the universe planted the desire for me to be a podcaster when I was 20. But podcasting as a technology did not exist. So it disguised it as the desire to narrate audiobooks. Like,
Hmm.
how cool is that? That's one of my favorite stories. Here's the other thing. I didn't know shit about podcasting, about marketing, about SEO, about lead gen. I knew nothing. I literally stumbled my way here. So here's my main message to anybody who's thinking of doing something they've never done before. I don't care whether it's podcasting, skydiving. Go as far as you can see, and when you get there, you can see further. Like the thing that stops us always is I don't know how. The universe will teach you how as you take more steps. You take a step, and then you're like, what are the options for where to place my foot next? And you just do take action, do something. You'll do something and you'll get feedback. So some of the things that I learned was one of my friends was like, okay, I know you have a podcast, Barb. You at least have to get onto Instagram. You have to have a way to get your podcast out there. And I had always been like, social media, blah. So I got onto Instagram. It actually, to this day, it's still my favorite social media platform. Um, I I can't remember at one point. I went to some online summit for women entrepreneurs, and there was this woman on there, Alicia Galati. And she was a podcast manager. And so she said some stuff that I was like, oh my God, she's amazing. And she offered for $97 to do a 5 podcast episode audit for you and then meet with you and give you recommendations. And so I was like, sold. And like the main thing that I remember that she said to me was you need to optimize the titles of your podcast episodes. Now, at this time, I was writing articles for medium.com and I knew to do that for those articles, but somehow it didn't translate to me. So if you look at my podcast titles, you can literally see the exact point after she audited me because I went from like the episode name is gratitude, right? The previous ones. And now it's like, how to develop a gratitude practice to change your life. You know what I mean? Like you can see the difference. And then I eventually knew like I'm going to eventually work with her. So I worked with the other guy for the first 130 episodes, and I was like, I need okay, this is a lot. All he did was produce it and get it out there. Like, I didn't know how to do that. I could have figured it out. So that's a lot, but he didn't do anything else. So I now work with her, and she does all this other stuff. They do the show notes for me. They pull out a teaser for me. They pull out quotes for me. I can see her twice a month for strategy sessions. I don't. I do it like quarterly because I only have so much bandwidth for podcasting strategy. But, she helps me with all different kinds of things. Her crew is amazing and it just takes all this stuff off of my plate. And I also didn't guest on podcasts for the longest time. And then what I've learned about doing that is I was in a free group for a while and I got blown off by so many podcast hosts that I was like, I'm going to be in a paid group because at least if people, it's $15 a month, they're likely to show up. And it was better, but it was an enormous amount of work for tracking and stuff. And for me, it was very labor intensive. And then actually, Alicia is the one that told me about Podmatch, which is where we met.
Yep.
And I love Podmatch. It's a little bit more expensive than the other platforms, but it's literally saves me so much time. Everything is in one platform. I don't need to keep track of anything anyplace else. There's a dashboard. I can vet people. I can look at how many stars and how many ratings and how many episodes and are they a jerk? All that kind of stuff. And so, like, I didn't know,
Right.
like, I had to learn these things as I went along. And then for a while there, I was guesting on 4 to 6 podcasts a month. And then this summer, I slowed down on everything. So I backed off to only 2 episodes a month, 2 newsletters a month. That's actually this week is going back up to weekly. I stopped networking. I stopped guesting because I have a ton of content that could be helping people, but it's sitting on my hard drive. So I took that time to start pulling things together so that I can get it out there in the world to help people. So I feel like I've said a lot. This is probably a good breaking point for you to say something since it's your show, and then we can go in so many different directions.
This is exactly why we do the show. Because when you're the host of the show, the episode's all about your guest.
Yeah.
And so when you're hosting a show, you don't get to just unload and talk about all these things and talk about your life. And so when I get podcasters on here, this is very commonly what happens. They
Yeah.
haven't been able to talk before, so they get to just
Yeah.
talk.
Yeah.
So it's great. We don't have an agenda here.
Yeah.
So we might be the only podcast out there right now that doesn't have,
Mhm.
one. We don't even really have a topic. Our topic is you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, we can go anywhere you want to go, but I love your story. A lot of what you said really hit home. Um, I'm a recovering, um, fully codependent ACOA myself.
No shit.
So
Okay.
yeah. So I mean, I heard a lot in what you had to say, and I've been down some of those same paths. So
Mm,
a lot of it rings very true for me with what you're talking about.
yeah.
The 12-step programs and the whole nine yards and everything else. But yeah. So I applaud you for with everything I've read and everything I've heard so far.
Mm,
You really are purposeful
mm,
about getting the help that you need
mhm,
and making sure it's the right help.
mhm, mhm,
And so I guess to be honest with you, out of everything that came up just now, I'm curious as to how that happened. Because so often as codependent people,
mhm.
we aren't because
Yeah.
we immediately write it all off. We may go, "Hey, I need help," but then we go, "Yeah, but
Yeah.
later."
Yeah. I feel like I am a very value-centered person, which is funny. Before recovery, I thought I was a values-oriented person. I violated my own values all the time. And I actually start off all my clients by figuring out their values. And I like to say, like, my number one value is growth, but it's actually not really a choice that I have. I have this thing inside of me that is grow, 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 grow. I don't have a choice about it. So I think it's just my constitution that is growth oriented. So I've been seeking, 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 but I did a lot of seeking and not necessarily a lot of applying and a lot of integrating. I didn't know that back then. And the thing about the 12 steps is they are a very powerful technology for deep and profound change. And I think one of the reasons that it works so well, especially for me, is, or there's three reasons. One, it's a structured program. I thrive in structure. There are 12 steps and you do them in a row. Number
Right.
two, it's in a community of people like me, some of whom are farther ahead, some of whom now are behind, and some of whom are my peers. So people with all levels of, we call it experience, strength, and hope in the program that I can learn from. And when I hear, like, I hear people tell stories, and I'm like, in 1,000 years, I would have never been able to articulate what they just said, but they literally described my life or the thought pattern or the behavior pattern or whatever it is. It happens all the time. And apparently, I'm gifted at that for other people. I'm like, I'm just talking, but somehow me just talking is really helpful to other people. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to keep doing it then, especially because you're listening to me. And then the third reason is that it's a spiritual program. And I don't know that everybody knows that. So I grew up agnostic, Rory. I just, until I was 37, and then I read the book Conversations with God,
Yep.
another really cool story. And over the course of the weekend that I read it, I became a believer in my conception of God. And in the beginning, when I used the word God in my head, I spelled it Godde, which is like halfway between God and goddess, because the idea of God having gender was insane to me. It still is. But now I've let go of a lot of baggage and I say he because it's expeditious, not because it's what I believe. So by the time I got into recovery, I identified as a pretty strongly spiritual person. But what I got from recovery was a relationship with a higher power of my understanding. I got a God that I use that I never did before. And so, what I mean by a God that I use is I turn my will and my life over to the care of God. I ask God for guidance. I say turn my will over. It was like I shoved things. I was like, you seriously, God, take this. Like, I can't handle it. And the first time that I ever handed something over to God and it was taken from me. It was for like 1.5 seconds. But I was like, wait, that's the thing? Like, and then I can hand things over. And I often, like, in the beginning, I was like, God's handing them back. And I'm like, no, no, I'm actually taking them back. But I ask for guidance. I make contact many, many, many times a day, prayer, meditation, journaling. I have certain prayers that I say throughout the day, but I also I'm like, all right, God, I don't know what to do. And do I do this or that? And just a word pops into my head. And I'm like, okay, that must be God. And I'm going to do it. And I think, like, to me, spirituality does not necessarily for me, it has to do with like the supernatural, but it doesn't have to. Like, even if you're agnostic, spirituality to me is I'm connected to something greater than myself. And so for people who are agnostics or atheists, what they often do in recovery is they think of the power of the group or the power of 12-step recovery as the power greater than themselves. So I think, that's the reason that 12-step recovery really works for me. And this is why I started the podcast. I didn't say this part, but there was so much wisdom in 12-step recovery that I never encountered, despite 37 years of therapy, self-help books, retreats, workshops, spiritual groups, like you name it. And there was so many game-changing things. And I was like, we need to get this wisdom out there into the world. That's why I started the podcast. And then, of course, I started it 6.5 years ago. So my journey in 12-step recovery has changed. So one of the things about 12-step programs that a lot of people don't know is that they're technically 12-step and 12 tradition programs. So the 12 steps are what individuals do to recover. The 12 traditions are sort of like, but not really policies, but they're guidelines for how the groups operate. And there are principles connected to all the traditions and all of the steps. And one of the traditions is that you are not supposed to use your identifiable characteristics publicly when speaking. You can't speak for any particular program. And that makes total sense. So let's just say it's easier to talk about alcoholism because people understand that. Let's say I am like a nationally known person that people know, and I tell everybody that I'm an Alcoholics Anonymous, and then I relapse and I ruin my life and my business and a bunch of other people's lives. Well, the public will now associate that person with that's what Alcoholics Anonymous is. And so we don't want that to happen. So for the first number of years with my podcast, it was I stalled on it because I didn't want to violate the traditions. And I was very specific that I'm not going to say any of the programs I'm in. And then a few years ago, I was a guest on the Adult Child podcast with Andrea Ashley, which is phenomenal. And her podcast is way bigger than mine. And I was like, okay, I've essentially come out to the world as an adult child. So I'm going to start talking about being an adult child. And then I started talking about Overeaters Anonymous. And I finally decided, like, I can live with violating their traditions. And I know that it's a violation of their traditions. I openly admit it on my podcast. Like, I've talked about it on my podcast. I also say I don't speak for or endorse any particular program of recovery. And what's happened is many people have come to understand that they are also adult children of dysfunctional families and they had intergenerational family dysfunction and they had childhood trauma. Some of these people have been in other recovery programs for decades and maybe even clean and sober and abstinent and all that stuff. But there's something not working for them and it's because of the trauma. And so they come to ACA because of me. The other thing that's been huge in my journey is I talked about the reparenting at the beginning. So the first 8 years that I was in ACA, I would say I kind of dabbled in reparenting. And so the theory is that everybody has an inner child, and that what we want to do is sort of cultivate an inner loving parent to counter that critical voice that we have, that everybody has, but some of us have it constantly for decades in this horrible ways. And in ACA, we call that the inner critical parent. And so we cultivate this inner loving presence to kind of not shove the critical voice out of the way entirely because it saved our lives, but to give space for the inner child to feel safe. And so I did some stuff, like I had a picture of me when I was little, and I found a song that the song "The Reason" by Hoobastank. I would sing it to that picture, and I just did this sort of organically. Nobody told me to do it. And the reason that song was appealing to me is because there's lines in there that say, I found a reason for me to change who I used to be, a reason to start over new, and the reason is you. And I, adult Barb, sang that to my little picture. And the way that I was taught in ACA to connect with my inner child was through non-dominant handwriting. So there's something about writing with your non-dominant hand that overrides like the reasoning part of the brain and somehow allows you to tap into an inner child. So in the first like 8 years I was in ACA, I would do that. I did it maybe 10 times in all those years. And it was either I was at an ACA workshop for doing inner child stuff, or the shit hit the fan in my life and I felt like I had to do something I've never done before, like connect. And then I heard a podcast on the adult child. I heard this woman, Susan Anderson, she's a trauma expert, and she said, if you really want to heal your relationship with your inner child, you need to do two things. One, you need to make consistent, conscious contact. And two, you need to make small promises that you keep. Like, I'm going to go for a walk, not I'm going to climb Mount Everest, just like little teeny tiny things. So I was like, all right, I'm going to do this. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday night, when I do my nightly gratitude journal, I'm going to just take 5 minutes and connect with my inner child. Because at the time, I only knew how to do it with the non-dominant handwriting. And I had always done it when something bad happened. So I just started doing it just for the heck of it. And you know what? If you want to build a relationship with somebody, spend time with them. So I'm spending time with my inner child. And then all of a sudden, I can connect in my imagination without the writing. All I had to do was close my eyes. Now I don't even have to close my eyes. And over time, I built this relationship with her. And then one day, like this, the inner teenager pops up, and I was like, oh, and then one day, this woman shows up, and I kind of intuitively knew that was my inner critical parent, which I had never identified with that title. And then one day it was like, her name is Irene. Like, I don't know how I know that. I got to tell you, Rory, now at this point in time, after 2.5 years of this, I make conscious contact every single morning with my inner family members. And it is unbelievably healing. I can, like, there are people who are listening who probably think I'm insane that I'm saying all this stuff. You go right ahead and think that I'm healing in deep and profound ways. So you can think me insane all you want. I'm having a lot of fun and I'm really healing really deep stuff. So, just to give you an example, this morning, so my little teeny one, I call her Spark. I don't know why. She's like a spark of life. She's like, let's say she's 4. So it's me, when I'm 4. So, and in my imaginary family, we live in a house on the beach. And she's like, she has this pretty dress on. She's like, can I go play in the sand? And I go, yes. And she goes, what if I ruin my dress? And I go, then your dress will be ruined. She goes, can I go in the water with my dress on? I'm like, yeah. And she goes, and then can I get in the sand? And I go, yep. And she goes, what'll happen? I go, you'll have a muddy dress. And she's like, wait, I can like make a choice and have my own, okay, these are adult words, shitty consequences and live with it. And I was like, yes, you can. And she was like, oh my God. Like, I get to make choices and make bad decisions instead of my parents always trying to not let me have negative consequences to my actions, or not, or my parents give me negative consequences that I completely have no idea what just happened. Like, I got in trouble for things that I was like, wait, what? What did I do? Like, I don't even know. So it was like this huge thing that I get to make a mistake. I get to have bad outcomes. And she said, well, like if the dress gets muddy, can we wash it? And I go, yeah, and it might be ruined. So you get a ruined dress. You get to choose what's more important to you. Having the experience of wearing the dress on the beach, in the water, in the sand, and having it muddy and seeing what happens, or having a dress that doesn't ever get wrecked. Like you choose, like, and I get why, like, for most parents, that's not going to be an option because they don't want to they don't want to buy another dress. They don't want to deal with a dirty kid. And like, I get that. I'm not saying my parents should have let me do that, but this the freedom of understanding, like I get to make choices. When you're codependent, you don't feel like you have choices. I didn't know. This is crazy. I didn't know that I could say no to things. It didn't feel like an option for me because I felt like people are going to think I'm a bad person. And that is the worst thing in the world to me. That because I cared so much what other people thought of me. And that's really that shift to caring more what I think of me than what other people do is the thing that enabled me to go from 50 something years of no boundaries to being having such good boundaries that I'm now a coach on it. And so when I say I care more what I think of me than what other people do, it doesn't mean I don't care at all, Rory. It means that I used to be willing to throw my integrity out the window and say yes to things that I didn't want to do, act like things were okay with me when they weren't, and like over volunteer and then bitch about the people that kept asking me to do stuff because I kept saying yes, but then I would complain about them behind their back. And I would try to manipulate people into liking me by doing things that would, quote, please them. And I'm not willing to do those things anymore. Being an honest woman of integrity is way more important to me than you liking me. Like, I want you to like me, but I don't like with claws need you to like
Right.
me. And partly because I like me, because I actually live with integrity. And I also don't do things that I don't like to do anymore. And I don't surround myself with people that annoy the shit out of me anymore. And I don't drain myself and I don't feel compelled to help out. Now, here's the thing. I give more service to my community now that I have healthy boundaries than I did before when I thought of myself as a volunteeraholic. So I have volunteered now at this point in time, it's been 16 different nonprofits that I have volunteered for over the years. And the reason that I'm able to give more in terms of hours per week is number one, I do it strategically, not at the drop of a hat. Number two, I do it by choice, not by compulsion or some um obligation, like if not me, then who? If not now, then when? Or I've been given so much. So I do it by choice. And then I also do it after filling my cup first. Rather than trying to pour from an empty cup, I fill my cup first with things that energize me so that when I'm giving, I have a lot to give and I still have a lot left when I'm done giving. So for me personally, the vast majority of my service work is in 12-step recovery. And guess what? It also benefits me because when I'm talking about 12-step recovery with other people, I can't forget like who I am, where I came from, what happened to me, how I healed, and all that stuff. So, for you overgivers and people pleasers and rescuers and fixers and enablers and codependents out there, there is hope. It doesn't mean that you're going to turn into a mean and nasty person that has walls between you and other people. You can still be very, very giving, but you start by giving to yourself first, which is not selfish. It's selfless because you actually have more to give. And you also model for people how to treat you. Now, the journey to get there is rough, but I look at it like this. You know, it's hard to start setting boundaries. It's even harder to never have any boundaries and be completely drained and resentful and exhausted and overwhelmed and feel demoralized all the time. That's really hard. And if you never set boundaries, that demoralization and that hard and overworked and overdrained and all that stuff is only going to get worse over time. It's just going to get worse. But the hard part of building boundaries is finite. It's only going to be hard for so long. You're going to get better at it. And the other side of those hard things that you're doing is healing and a whole new way of life that is pleasurable and easeful and energizing. So, pick your hard. Which poison do you want? The hard, long, extended, never going to end one of never setting boundaries, or the finite difficulty of changing the lifelong patterns and then turning, like realizing who I actually am, what is okay with me, what's not okay with me, where do I end and other people begin, What do I want? What do I like? What do I need? What do I prefer? Like, I didn't know any of that stuff, Rory, despite all of that self-help stuff, all of the introspection that I did. I thought I knew who I was. I also thought that I was a powerful woman of agency. And I learned in recovery that I actually kind of felt like shit about myself. Even though I felt like I liked myself and had high self-esteem, I could see I did not feel worthy. When I look at my past behaviors, like that is not a woman who feels worthy. And I definitely didn't trust myself. That I knew. And I didn't love myself. I truly and deeply love myself now. I feel worthy and I really trust myself. And when I look at like what happened to change those things, how did I go from not loving myself to loving myself? How did I go from not trusting to trusting? How did I go from unworthy to worthy? And it was a lot of things, but for me, it was primarily the boundary building journey because that's a journey of getting to know yourself. It's a journey of figuring out what do I like and want and need and prefer, and then giving it to yourself. It's a journey of showing up for yourself in ways you never have before, drawing lines in the sand that you don't cross and you don't allow other people to cross, and of really taking care of yourself. And when you have a person in your life that really gets to know you and gives you things that you love and gives you a better life, it's kind of hard not to love that person. And it's even better when it's you. So, I'll pause again in case you want to throw anything in there.
You were on fire.
I,
I
I
loved
told
it.
you, captive audience.
Absolutely love it. The especially towards the end there, it sounds like this is the message of the podcast, and the goal of the podcast is to get this message out there to folks. Am I close?
Yeah. Yeah. Like you can change. Like it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter how much trauma or pain or anything you've been through. It doesn't, nothing, none of it matters. Healing is possible. You are not beyond hope. Like it's just, it's available to you. Like it is possible to change. And so many people think they can't change. And here's the thing, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're right. Because if you think you can't, you're not even going to try. But if you think you can, nothing can stop you.
Love it. I love that. Let me ask you a podcast question just
Mhm.
for a minute. You have it sounds like a team of people that kind of help you with this.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
the Galati Media
Right.
Studio. Yeah.
Do they do your promotion and stuff for you too, or is it just the nuts and bolts of producing?
So so I have a virtual assistant that creates the graphics and does all my like I create the content for social media, but I create the concepts. She creates all of the graphics. Galati Media pulls out like here's a bunch of really great juicy quotes. My virtual assistant creates the graphic for those and schedules. We use later.com to schedule them in. So I've actually been leveraging AI a lot. Oh my God, I love me some AI. And I now like what I've always done is narrate, or not always, for the longest time, I've narrated my into Microsoft Word because I act like I'm talking to a person in recovery. I narrate it into Word and then I clean it up. Well, now I narrate it into ChatGPT and I'm like, please clean this up for me. So it's my words, but rearranged in a way that's more like systematic and thoughtful and stuff like that. So I would say ChatGPT is my assistant. And then, so did I answer your question?
You, you answered several because I always ask everybody about AI in their business, and
Yeah.
you went right there. So
Yeah.
you're just such a podcaster that you're answering the questions before I can ask them, which
Uh,
is really fun.
well, I've been doing it for a while.
Clearly. Have you had a chance to? I know you monetize through your coaching programs.
Mhm.
Have you had a chance to monetize your podcast in any other way or considered
Yeah.
it? And where are you
I
on that?
yeah, I have considered it, but my episodes are almost entirely solo episodes.
Mhm.
Every 10th episode, I have a guest. They have to be in recovery, and my episodes are like 10 to 20 minutes. So they're basically too brief to do ads for. At least that's what I've come to understand. But it is the number one way that I get clients. Google is getting up there in terms of another way that I'm starting to get clients, but because the thing is, when you want to coach with somebody, you want to feel like they can actually give me the transformation that I'm looking for. And so
Yeah,
often when I get on a call with people, they'll be like, I feel like I know you. And I say, do you listen to my podcast? And they're like, yes. And so I'm like, yeah, you do, because I'm 100% me on my podcast,
nice.
including the swearing.
Which I noticed. Yeah, I was ready for that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. You've done a really good job today, though.
Thank you.
I mean, yeah, you warned me ahead of time, but I mean,
Yeah.
you've been just sort of cruising without it. So,
Yeah. Yeah. This is like the top of my
let me, in the interest of time, let me ask you my corny question. What is it about doing your podcast that you love the most? And what is it about doing your podcast that you just absolutely hate the most?
I can't think of anything that I absolutely hate. But I'll come up with what do I love? The creation process. The so for me, I want to literally give lessons from 12-step recovery, though sometimes my wisdom isn't necessarily from recovery, but I'll get like a nugget of an idea and then fleshing it out, like turning it into a full-blown episode. And it could be an idea because I heard someone else in recovery say something, or I had an issue with a client that I was able to help them through. And for me, like my podcast manager actually said to me, "Oh, you're an external processor," when I told her that I narrate into Word, because what happens for me, Rory, is I kind of brilliant shit comes out of my mouth sometimes when I'm talking. I'm like, I better write it down. And so I will come up with solutions, like mid talking. And so it's the creation process. And speaking of creation, I mean, there's lots of ways that I conceive of this thing that I call God, one of which is like the creator. And a lot of people say, and I'm sure it's multiple religions, that we are created in the image and likeness of God. And I think, to me, what that primarily means is we are creators, just like the creator. So when I'm in creation mode, I'm as close to God as I can possibly be, because I'm creating, I'm doing the thing that the creator does. So I feel like that whatever the creative process, whether it's me like doing crafts, or me creating a social media post, or me, especially the podcast, or my newsletters are actually repurposed episodes of my podcast, but it's still a creation process. So that's my favorite. What's my least favorite? So I'm a sociologist by training, and I was trained in like program evaluation and data and all that stuff. And I love data, but I hate tracking the fucking numbers. Like, I don't care. I have to care because I'm a business owner. Well, I don't have to. I choose to care because I'm a business owner.
Right.
I don't like, I just want to do my podcast. Like, I don't want to keep track of the numbers and the blah, 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 you
That's
know?
awesome. All right. Gotcha. Excellent answer.
That is
Excellent
not a
answer.
funny question. I thought it would be like a dad joke or something.
Oh, I don't go that bad. I mean,
Okay.
come on
You.
now. No, I call it my corny question because it's like, so what do you love the most? What do you hate the most? It's just kind of generic, but the answers we get are fantastic.
I
So that's
can
why I keep asking it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 100 and some episodes still in here. We're still asking the question. It's working out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Listen, I appreciate everything that you've brought to the table today. In the interest of time, as we kind of start to wrap things up here, let me throw it to you one last time. You've been doing this for more than a minute, and
Mm,
so what is your best piece of advice for the podcasters that are listening out there that are not quite where you are yet?
mm. Keep going. Just keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. If you enjoy the process, keep going. If you don't, then stop. But like, don't be so fixated on the numbers. Like, one of the things that my podcaster said to me, my podcast manager, when I first started working with her, was stop comparing yourself to other people. Because, and we do in recovery, like I learned your trauma, you experience 100% of your trauma and 0% of other people's. Stop
Right.
comparing. You are doing your thing and they're doing their thing. So stop comparing, right? But the other thing that she said that really helped me was, if you had 400 people as a captive audience in a room to listen to you for 20 minutes, how would you feel about that? I'm like, that would be amazing. And she goes, okay, so then you can be okay with 400 people listening to your podcast. because that's what that is. Except for that they're in the convenience of their home, their car, their shower, their kitchen, their workplace, whatever they're doing. And they're probably not just listening to you once. They're listening to you many times. So don't get fixated on the numbers. If this is a mission for you, the podcasting is a long game. Long, long game. So if you're looking for the quick fix, unless you have some kind of magic pill, or you have some big, huge brand and you've decided to add podcasting, then it's not going to be a quick fix. It's a long game. And I do it both because I really enjoy it and because I know that it deeply and profoundly helps people.
Nice. Nice. And that comes from, uh, firsthand knowledge because you've listened to a lot of podcasts that have helped you in the past.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Wonderful.
I also get feedback from people, and it brings tears to my eyes. And I'm like, I'm just talking.
Great, great advice, though. Um,
Actually, I want to say one other thing.
please do.
When I first started coaching, I went to this training and this guy, uh, Giovanni Marsico, and his something about his business is called Dream. I don't remember the rest of the name of it. And he said that he believes that many of us, our greatest gifts are the thing we got in trouble for as a kid. He said, when I was a kid, I was told, get your head out of the clouds, stop being a dreamer. And now what he does is help people's dreams come true. So he said, I just want to ask you, what did you get in trouble for? Well, guess what I got in trouble for when I was a kid, Tori? Talking. Okay. What do I do for a living? I talk. I'm a coach. I talk. I'm a connector in the world of entrepreneurship. I talk. I'm a podcaster. I talk. I get paid to talk now. So let me add it, give me a microphone. I'm on it.
I like that. I'm going to have to take that for a ride a little bit. That
Yeah.
if you, whatever you got in trouble for as a kid thing.
Yeah.
So wonderful.
What did you get in trouble for as a kid?
This is not my episode.
Come
No,
on.
no, this is about Barb Nangle.
Maybe you can message me privately afterwards.
Speaking of which, yeah, boundaries coach, speaker, host of Fragmented to Whole Life Lessons from 12-Step Recovery. Barb Nangle, thank you for everything you brought to us today. I am not getting sucked into that conversation right now, but maybe
Oh, Corey, nice boundary.
there you go. That's right. I learned that in ACOA. All right. So anyway, I love everything you brought up today. I really do. And it was very, very good, useful, helpful information to anybody who's dealing with this type of thing. So because of that, especially, thank
Mhm.
you for everything you brought today.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me and giving me a platform to just share.
Yeah, you were great. I appreciate it. Folks, it's been another awesome episode of the Podcaster Nation. And the reason we get these powerful podcasters on here is because this is the podcast. It's about podcasters, it's for podcasters, and it's done by podcasters. I think we showed again today that this is the place where the rising tide truly raises all ships. So keep sailing.